New alarm bells ringing tonight on the coronavirus outbreak in this country.
Doctors say the virus is spread through droplets when someone coughs or sneezes.
And I think the business community, it's in their interest that people actually stay home and stop the spread.
For a business that can allow more employees to telecommute, we want you to do that.
Hi, friends. I'm Andy Paul, host of the Sales Enablement Podcast, and I want to encourage you to listen to my brand new special 6-part podcast miniseries titled Selling with Purpose. The team behind Sales Enablement Podcast and I put together this incredible series of inspiring conversations exploring what it means to sell with a mission greater than just hitting your numbers in this era of COVID-19 and beyond. So tune in to hear from world-class enterprise sales leaders and learn how their 6 companies will close $50 billion selling remotely. See how they've supported essential workers with the products and services they need to stay safe and thrive during this time of crisis. Subscribe to Selling with a Purpose now on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Guided selling from RingDNA makes your entire sales team more effective by revealing exactly what reps should do and when to do it. Guided selling works by transforming sales data into a curated list of prioritized sales actions. So when reps start their day, they'll never again wonder which prospects and accounts or hot inbound leads to reach out to next. Guided selling even shifts reps' priority in response to real-time buying signals. Finally, even new reps can sell like seasoned ones. Let RingDNA be your guide to success. Learn more at ringdna.com/guided selling. That's ringdna.com/guided selling.
It's time to accelerate. Hey friends, this is Andy. Welcome to episode 714, that's 714, of Accelerate, the sales podcast of record. I have another excellent episode lined up for you today. Joining me is my guest, David Masover. Now, David's the author of a book titled The Salesman's Guide to Dating, a sales book about making connections with an unexpected twist, which is absolutely true. And David has joined me today from his office in Budapest, Hungary. So we're going to start to talk a little bit about David's journey from the U.S. and how does he end up being this well-known sales expert based in Hungary. And then we're going to delve into our sort of core topic that we're going to talk about today, which are sort of back on the fundamentals and the basics. And one of the key questions we want to get into is how do we successfully develop new generations of sellers without having to go back and reinvent the wheel every time a new cadre of sellers enters the workforce? And we're also going to talk about how do we educate sellers to develop their own style or framework, as David talks about it, their own style of selling. You know, something that's authentic to you, that enables you to sell and win up to your potential. So, yeah, it might be based on methodology, it might be based on certain skills and behaviors, but it's something that's unique and authentic to you that really resonates with the buyer. So how do you develop that? So you want to make sure you stick around for this. Now, before we get to David, I want to take a quick second to talk about the Sales House. That's my sales performance accelerator for B2B sellers. Now, in the typical sales training, you learn a lot of things, with the exception of how to win. You know, in sales, winning orders is not the result of your process or the methodology you use. It comes from doing a lot of small things extremely well. Now, in the Sales House, I focused on teaching you the strategies, behaviors, techniques, and skills you don't learn in sales training, but that will make a huge difference in your ability to win new business. I mean, you may know how to build a relationship with a prospect, but do you know the 4 core relationship skills that will enable you to accelerate building a trust-based relationship with any buyer? Or perhaps you've been trained how to do a discovery call, but do you know the 2 most important pieces of information you need to learn from your prospects? Because knowing these will make the huge difference between winning and losing, and you haven't been trained on that. You've been coached how to qualify an opportunity, but do you know the 1 agreement you need to reach with your prospect before they can be considered truly qualified? And if you have that agreement, will increase your odds of winning the deal. You know, if you're not up to speed on all these things, then you're at a competitive disadvantage, and the Sales House is the resource you need to reach the next level and the level above that. Members get unlimited access to checklists, playbooks, courses, coaching, mentoring, and an engaged community to help you sell with more confidence, trust, and acumen. So come learn how to become the winningest version of you in the Sales House. Visit thesaleshouse.com. That is thesaleshouse.com. All right, let's jump into it with my guest, David. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure to have you here. So you are our first guest joining us from Budapest, Hungary.
Wow. And I'm not even Hungarian.
And you're
Isn't
not
that
even
terrible?
Hungarian. When my wife is half Hungarian. So
My wife is all the way Hungarian.
Is she? Okay.
The question that's following, right?
All right, so why are you there, right?
Yeah. The short answer is she was pretty. The long answer usually requires several drinks, but we probably don't want to go there today.
All right, well, you and I will have to do the drink sometime. But did you meet your wife here in the States, or did you meet her in Hungary?
So I met my first wife in the States, and she was from Hungary. We met in San Francisco back in 2001. And she had never lived in Hungary as an adult. She moved to the States to go to university and then law school. And then we met and we got married, and we decided, if she didn't live in Hungary at some point as an adult, she would always feel like she was missing something in her life.
Sure.
So in 2004, we decided, okay, let's go for 2 years. And, that was 14 years ago. Since then, a whole lot of life has happened, kids and divorces and remarriages. And, that's the part where the drinks come in. But that's how I got here.
All right. So you're year 14 of your 2-year plan.
Year 14 of my 2-year plan, yes.
Okay. Well, I'm just, and I've talked about this, and my wife does listen to my podcast occasionally, so she'll hear this too. But I got remarried, married for a second time in 2010, moved from San Diego here to New York, where I am today in my New York office. And we had a 2-year plan to move from New York to San Diego full time. And we're in year 9 of our 2-year plan.
Welcome to the club.
Welcome to the club. Yeah, my wife, Vicky, will be glad to hear that there's more than one of us.
Well, the old joke. Do you know how to make God laugh?
They make plans, right? Yeah.
Tell them your plans, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So, all right. So are you in, most important question, are you in Buda or Pest?
I'm in Buda.
Okay. You're in Buda.
Yes.
Excellent.
Have you been here? Because it's mostly people who have been here that know to ask that question.
No, I haven't been there, but I'm aware of the fact that it was 2 cities. But as I said, my wife's father was Hungarian, left the country right before World War II. And so she's been back. And she was there just a year or so ago. She was lecturing in Bratislava in Slovakia and hadn't been to Budapest for a while, so she took the opportunity to go. So,
well,
all right.
If any of the listeners are coming to the neighborhood, drop me a line. I'd be happy to show you around.
That'd be fantastic. I'm looking forward to it. So, okay, we're going to talk about sales.
There you go.
Now
that we've covered geography, right?
People are accustomed to little digressions here and there on the show.
All right. Well, we did that.
So let's talk about a topic you and I talked about previously, which is, why does it seem like every time we get a new generation of sellers into the mix, that we sort of seem to be starting over again, that we're sort of recreating the wheel? Why isn't there sort of this ethos that that sort of should permeate the environment now that, is why does it seem like we're still, after literally 130 years roughly of modern American selling, sort of starting in the 1890s with National Cash Register, why are we still every time, most of the sales training is still about, asking good questions, being curious about the other person? I mean, it keeps me employed, but why are we still having to teach these things?
I think that's a great question. And I think the really honest answer is I don't know, and it frustrates me. I have some theories, but it's strange.
Give us a theory.
Well, but the reason that I think it's strange is because there's just so much information now. I mean, when I first started in sales, I had my first sales job in 1991, and it was tough. I had no background in sales. Nobody in my family was in sales.
Sure. Yeah, me neither.
It was like, here's a day of product training. There's your desk. Good luck, buddy. I mean,
what were
really,
you selling?
I was selling computer supplies, discs and ribbons. You remember those little balls that you put on top of your IBM Selectric typewriter?
Yeah.
Pure commodities, right?
Sure.
Brutal. And, I didn't know what to do and I didn't know where to go. Luckily, one of my colleagues gave me an audio cassette. That's how long ago it was. An audio cassette copy of Brian Tracy's Psychology of Selling. And it was totally over my head. He kept talking about closing. I'm not kidding you, Andy. I did not know what he meant by the word close. I mean, that's how lost I was. I'm like, what is that? Why do they keep saying that, But now, fast forward to 2019, there's so much information, so many great books, great content, great podcasts. And yet, I talk to many people who are our colleagues, who are Salesforce development consultants or whatever they call themselves. And you walk into a company and the problems are core, basic, fundamental problems. And I don't know why they haven't been solved. One theory would be that I think that many times the basics are assumed away. I think that there's this kind of fundamental mystery around sales and selling. It's kind of like finance. Money isn't that difficult to understand, but people kind of don't want to talk about it, so they don't understand it, and they just let their finance guy take care of it. And I think sales is similar. If you're not in sales, and too many people who are, they don't want to really think about it. They just want to hire someone who's going to do it and kind of hope it gets done. And so you wind up with these company cultures that just don't have this passion for learning, this passion for studying. You see some of it, but not enough. And I think there's a lack of focus on just the core basics. We're all looking for the magic bullet or the super tech or the fancy technique or the perfect cadence or the millions of calls that have been analyzed to tell us what to say. It's like, no, the truth is just more fundamental than that. And I don't think enough people start there. That would be my theory about one possible theory about why this problem keeps repeating is lack of focus on the basics and fundamentals.
And it seems like, to me, that it's being compounded a bit by technology these days, that we're giving people, sellers, the impression that, if you're a little deficient in this area, if you're having a hard time connecting with someone, making that initial connection, engaging their interests, that, we're going to be able to handle that with, either our bot will take that to a certain point, then hand it off to you. And I think that's a false promise. Certainly AI is improving on many fronts, but AI is really bad at empathy.
For example.
For instance. And will continue to be so for the foreseeable future. And that's one that's hugely complex. If they can master empathy, then true empathy, then that's that'll be really interesting. But I don't think I'll have to worry about that in my career. But I think, again, there's people are sort of being seduced into thinking that technology can handle that. And so I think what we see, especially the way we see some sales organizations structured these days with the increased sort of specialization, is that, we're sort of reinforcing this in some ways, that some of these things just aren't important, that we can handle things sort of in quantity, makes up for sort of the lack of quality in some areas where it really doesn't. But what's your thought?
I think technology is really interesting, and I'm not a technology guy. I've been close to technology for a lot of my life, but I'm a sales guy.
Hey, you sold Selectric type heads. Oh my gosh!
Listen, I founded a .com startup company, but it's still a sales focus. But I think the dimension that technology is currently bringing into sales is this idea that kind of we can break it down into a process that's very finite and sequenced. And I think people have been trying to do that for a long time. I know I tried to do that early in my career. I thought, okay, I'm going to script out every possible answer that somebody says. And I think a lot of people have tried to do that. I'm brave enough to admit it. Hi, I'm Masover. I'm a closet call scripter, whatever, right? But, most people who stick with sales kind of through that part where it's rough and they're trying to figure it out come to realize that it's about people. And yes, there should be kind of a framework, and yes, there are some best practices, and yes, there are some things that you can do consistently kind of at a framework level. But at the end of the day, it's about people. And if that part can't get injected into a technology process, the technology process is always going to be limited. But the technology process is very sexy, right? It's compelling. It's got a compelling value proposition.
Yeah.
And I think that sometimes we can get a little bit carried away that like, wow, their AI analyzed 1 million calls. And if I say 3 times, I'm lost. But if it's only 2, it's like, yeah, that's probably true. But
no, it's actually probably not. But yeah, anyway.
but either, I don't know. Like it might be a fact, but like I think Dan Pink in his famous TED Talk made the distinction between facts and true facts. So that might be a fact, but I don't think it's a true fact.
Yeah. Well, it's you can correlate something to everything.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
And there's been famous studies done about that where you can take. I think there's one I was reading about in a book called Every Data, which is a great book about how we misuse data. And yeah, I think they something about there's a correlation between the number of lawyers in Samoa and like the murder rate in San Francisco. I mean, it was like you can draw correlations everywhere, but yeah, there's no cause.
Yep. There's actually a website. It's called Spurious Correlations. I don't know if it's still up, but I know they correlated, I think, margarine consumption and divorce rate in Delaware. It's like, okay, there you go, right?
Yeah, I think actually, it was based on a book, I think. And I'm not sure if the website's still up, but the book is still available.
Yep.
So it seems like for at least to me, it seems like we're sort of going about how we're building our sales processes a little bit backwards. Interesting your take about this, because you wrote about sales process when you're relating your experience out of McDonald's. And was that McDonald's in Budapest?
It was McDonald's in Budapest. It's pretty much the same here.
All right.
They just don't have pancakes for breakfast, but otherwise it's pretty much the same.
Okay. And what do they call like the Big Mac? It's not the Royale or the Quarter Pounder.
That's from what's that movie? Pulp Fiction, right?
Right.
Have a Quarter Pounder in Europe because they don't have pounds, so it's
well, in France it's the Royale.
Yeah, here it's the Scheitosh McRoyal or something. Scheitosh, but it's something like that. Anyway,
all right.
But yeah, I mean, the reason that I actually discovered the sales process all by myself. This is,
you did?
I did. Yeah, kind of. Kind of like Al Gore invented the internet.
Yeah.
Right after I figured out what closing was, I started thinking, how am I going to figure out this sales thing? My dad was a scientist. I'm like, okay, I'll experiment. So I looked at this big thing called sales and I started chopping it up into pieces. And, okay, so what do I do first? And, who do I target and what do I say and what do I do next? And before I knew it, I had this thing. And then one day somebody told me, yeah, that's called the sales process. And I'm like, wow, cool. Like I invented it. Like, no, you didn't. But, I thought of it. And, it's funny because now in hindsight, so many years later, I think I would have called it a framework instead of a process. Because I think the word process, I don't think it's misleading. I think it's a good word. But I think it's a word that kind of takes people to a place that's a little bit more granular than you want to think about this stuff.
Yeah, well, I think a process assumes a logical conclusion, which rarely happens, and which I think is one of the problems. The framework, I think, is interesting. But my point was, it seems like, again, today, is we see companies, I believe, is engineering the process the wrong way. And let me give you an example. So we know in the SaaS business that they devote a tremendous amount of time and effort to top of the funnel activities, generating a ton of leads, but the close rate at the back end's pretty low. But they've accepted that because, hey, as long as we can get opportunities at the top of the funnel and really good at that, then we'll accept this percentage, these conversion percentages. But to me, it's like, yeah, but there's so much waste and inefficiency and ineffectiveness throughout that whole thing. To me, it's sort of criminal. Is why not start the other end and say, okay, instead of saying we're going to close 1 out of every 5 opportunities, let's set the stake in the ground that we're going to go out and do our initial, selling just to see what we're going to sell. Yeah, we think we can close 1 out of every 2 opportunities and close 50% of our opportunities. Now let's build our process from there that says, okay, we want to maintain that close rate. Now, how do we build our process out to scale in order to keep that close rate? And to me, that's how I've done it when I've built teams. Is let's scale from what we know an outcome is, and how do we maintain that level of outcome as opposed to let's just focus purely on the inputs into the system.
I always got I always got uncomfortable when somebody wanted to know what I thought the conversion rate was going to be before we actually did some work. I think it's really tempting to say, okay, what do you think it's going to be? How should I know? I'm happy to guess, but it's a guess. In my first book, Mastering Your Sales Process, I talked about this concept called front loading. Again, which I could claim I invented, but it's obviously something that a lot of people talk about just because it's smart. But the idea is, if you look at kind of all the steps that it takes to get to a sale, and you start there. It's not a good idea to say, okay, they should all take about the same amount of time. That's kind of a silly assumption to start with. A better way to look at it is to say, okay, so if this is where I want to get at the end of the process, what can I do early on in the process to give me a higher chance for success?
Exactly.
So, I don't know what the number is going to be, but I know that if I want to be having this conversation at the end, there are things I can be doing in the beginning. Who I choose to talk to, how I choose to get into that conversation, how I choose to ask questions in the beginning to really see if we're a good fit together, otherwise known as qualification, right? Real new concept.
Yeah, preliminary qualification.
Yeah, how can I do, what's known as discovery or needs analysis in a way that it's not only going to give me the information that I need, but give me an opportunity to position my solution. And when you set it up correctly, you give yourself that higher chance to convert at the end. So I think you're exactly right. You can wind up with a funnel that looks really like this, but it just makes it hard for everybody, right? You burn out your salespeople, you burn out your customers and your prospects. Nobody enjoys that process. Why not figure out what problems you solve and train your salespeople to get into conversations with people that have those problems, help them understand the solution, and work gracefully towards a close. Won't work every time, but your conversion rate is going to be an awful lot higher if you begin the process thinking about where you want it to be in the end and really working on it in that kind of a holistic way.
Yeah, to me, obviously talk to a lot of people, day in and day out in sales because of this podcast and the work I do, and to me, one of the things that's sort of become clear to me, and this relates to the point you were making, I believe, is that one thing we don't talk enough about in sales or educate people about is winning. Right? We've got this process, and the process assumes if we do these things, we're going to get an order.
Right.
But there's things that have to happen at each step along the way that and some of these are pretty point, solutions are finite that make a huge difference in terms of your ultimate outcome. And so when you're talking about front loading, I used a similar term because I was selling very large systems, multiple millions of dollars for a long time. And I knew that there was always sort of two critical points in the deal, one obviously being the end, getting the order, but there was a midpoint that I knew that if I sold to that point, that was pretty much the point where the customer was going to make the decision, we're going to make a change or not. Yeah. Right? We've had enough information, we can put our business case together, and we can justify going forward.
Yeah, that's different than closing. It's the point in the middle of kind of the total sales conversation where the customer turns and they become...
they've made the decision they're going to make the change. Before then, they haven't committed to making a change. Now, the second order decision is who are we going to make the change with. But I knew that if I won that first one, if I really focused on front loading, as you talked about, really being high value early on, that when they reach that point, I might not have won the order at that point, but I called it, I won the sale.
Yeah.
It was mine. It was mine to lose at that point.
Yeah.
And so, I wasn't really focused on this logical stage-driven process all the way through to the end. I was focused on that midpoint because I worked like hell, and I got my team, everybody that worked with me, sellers that I taught. That's the point you focus on. Focus on that midpoint. You win that, your odds of winning the deal, 75, 80%.
And if you don't win that, the odds of winning the deal are also certain.
Oh yeah, then you stop selling to them.
Right.
You should know at that point.
Right.
So and that's the thing that we get to with qualification. Again, when we talk about winning, winning's so practical. It's tactical. Yeah. And when we say everything is logical and we got these stage exit criteria and so on, it really stops people from thinking about, there's something that happens every time I interact with somebody that could make a difference between winning and losing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's almost like we're not competing, right? To me, part of the reason I was attracted to sales is I'm hugely competitive, right? I'm not, I am. I like to win. I hate to lose. But I was fortunate working for people that were just, so gracious and generous and giving me advice and tips out, well, do this here, do this here. It's the little things that you begin to accumulate over time that becomes almost your own process.
Yep.
But instead of being replaced with a sort of uniform, vanilla, bland, mechanized process we go through, that it's little things with the other person that really are critical.
Yep. I went through kind of an interesting change. When I came to Budapest, I mostly worked in the region for quite some time. And from about 2010 until about 2016, I kind of diverted away from a lot of the sales stuff or sales consulting. I was doing a lot of interim management work. The startup scene got really hot here, and I got involved in a lot of that. And it was only recently that I came back, and I decided, the region is great, but it's a big world. And, with my books, I could see that I was always getting a lot of web traffic from America. I thought, let's start doing some content on LinkedIn. Let's see if I can generate business in other places in the world. And, it's been successful and it's been fun. But as a part of that work, I started working with individual salespeople, not just sales organizations, but just individuals who would, pull a credit card out of their wallet and pay. And it's a subset. It's a small subset. You got to love these people. But what was really interesting was just working with these ground level reps, not in the context of their organization. I was doing a lot of call reviews, and I was shocked at a lot of what I was hearing, because in more than a few occasions, I was listening to reps who were clearly kind of stepping through a demo or stepping through a discovery, and it was almost as if they weren't even a person. I don't want to exaggerate it too much. But it was like, okay, I've asked this question. Now I ask this question. Now I ask this question. And I might throw out this, so does that sound valuable to you? Or can you see how that would provide value? And it was so foreign to me.
Well, and I
know sales to be.
Right. And you can hear that on calls when you listen to call recordings, is because there's always, they ask the question, the customer answers, and there's a pause.
Yep.
And so the pause is they're taking a quick note, and then they're scanning to the next question to ask. Yep. And it just becomes this thing that becomes so noticeable. And so you're right. It's not a conversation. It's an interrogation.
At best. Yeah. Yeah. It's an interview. And I think that, when we talk about what sales really is, I think it's this balance between doing the right things the right way, but with somebody. You're going through a process with somebody. These techniques and these frameworks and these processes, they're there to kind of give us guidelines, and I mean, we could go into the whole sports analogy thing, but that's just been beaten to death, right? But it's a good analogy, right? I mean, if you want to win a soccer game, kick the ball into the goal, right? But there's more to it than that. And there's more to it than that part that kind of gets lost when you're just going through the steps in a really mechanical fashion.
Yeah, well, absolutely. I mean, I'm a huge soccer fan, so I love soccer analogies. But a big part of soccer is creating opportunities to score, and you can say that, but it's true about every game. But I mean, as people know, goals are sort of at a premium in soccer, and you're really measuring in some way. Are they creating chances to score and shots on goal? That's very analogous to individual interactions you have throughout the sales process. Are you creating an opportunity to score? And if we're too robotic about it, if we're too scripted, but I don't want to put the onus on the salespeople. To me, this is really a cultural issue.
Totally agree.
Because as we adopt sales processes, it's too easy for the sellers to feel, well, even if I don't succeed, if I follow the process, that's safer.
Yeah.
And sometimes even very experienced people I'm seeing are falling prey to this. And I've talked about this in the past. I think I was fortunate, I guess, when I was coming into sales to work for people that were willing to give me enough rope to hang myself.
Yes.
And I took it. And maybe it's just part of my personality. is, I want to do it my way. But we have to get people to the point, sellers, to the point where they feel enabled to do things their way, that they become the best version of themselves, not another clone of some top person, whatever that means.
But you're absolutely right when you say we can't really put the onus on the sellers, because, as I went through this process in this last year or so of talking to a lot of these reps, there were no shortage of them who wanted to try some of the things that we talked about and who wanted to innovate and who wanted to experiment. And that was discouraged, especially if it was at the expense of the activity metrics.
Well, that was the point. That's such a critical point. I was about to say that. I'm glad you brought that up, because that's what's constraining people, is right. I've got to hit this number. And if I vary the process and I don't succeed at first, then I'm going to get slapped.
Yes. Yeah. And I think that you can speculate, or you can observe, or you can document where all that came from, but I don't think that matters. I think if an organization decides they really want to turn the tables, they have to recognize it as a problem, and they have to recognize that success comes when their salespeople work with prospects and customers as people, but that also goes up the chain. Right? The sales manager, the frontline manager, salesperson relationship also has to be more than mechanical and metrics and KPIs and dashboards and the number at the end of the month. Sales coaching is something that I just don't see happening within organizations.
Well, I think right.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. Well, I was going to say, I think part of the problem there is, and I'm sorry, I didn't mean to jump on your point, is that we don't really tell people correctly what they should be doing when they're coaching. And so when you say coaching, what most frontline managers take that to mean is opportunity coaching. Mm-hmm. And to me, that's okay. But, there's really more to it. You have to develop the person. And so I think a useful construct for people to think about it is that there's managing, coaching, mentoring. Mm-hmm. And actually, I have a new acronym that I've been going to be writing about, which actually is POPE, P-O-P-E, where it's, you have your process, opportunities, people, education. And this is how managers should be dividing their time. Is the process is I'm capacity building, right? This is where I manage the organization. My process is where I hire people, I recruit. I'm building the capacity of my organization. The O is opportunity coaching. Yeah, this is where I work with the people on increasing our close rates, increasing our yield for revenue. The second P is people, right? I'm developing the people. Opportunity coaching doesn't develop the people. What am I doing to invest in my people to help them become the best version of themselves? And the E is creating a culture of learning or education in the organization. And I think people should sort of managers divide their time, so 40, 30, 20, 10 through the acronym. So 40 on process, 30 on opportunity coaching, 20 on people development, which is really capacity building or capability building, excuse me. First P is capacity, this is capability building, and then 10% on education. Mm-hmm. And we don't see anything close to that, unfortunately.
No. I think what's really interesting about those categories is there's, having thought about it for all of 10 seconds now, there's at least two ways to look at it. You could look at each of these letters, each of these categories in a finite way. But I think what's really exciting and where it really has potential is when you start seeing how each one can impact the other. Mm-hmm. How opportunity coaching can lead to education, how education, I haven't really thought this through, but I think you could really spend some time thinking about that. And the things that you learn from opportunity coaching should feed your development of the process. And the things that you learn when you're developing the process should dictate the kind of education that you're working on with your people. So exactly. When you start thinking about it, not only categorically, but also holistically, that's when I think you've got the power to really take your organization to the next level. But when you're stuck too much in the weeds at, just the metrics, which are the output of whatever's happening, instead of what's leading to that output, I think it's really hard to make a truly significant and long-lasting impact.
Well, it is. And that sort of leads to a point which, unfortunately, we don't have enough time left to really dig into, but which is productivity. Mm-hmm. And we have a whole slew of frontline managers that think that productivity just has to do with hitting the activity metrics or whatever metrics that they've set up, which really have nothing to do with productivity. I mean, to me, productivity is always about revenue output. How much revenue am I producing per hour of selling time? Yeah. I mean, productivity, there's a universal measure for productivity, basically, economists use, and yet we seem to think that sales is immune from that. We don't talk about productivity being little piece parts as opposed to the outcome. So, I don't need to go on that soapbox now, but another time we'll come back and we'll get on that.
Come out to Budapest. We'll have a palinka. That's a brandy. We'll work that out.
All right. Yeah. Well, goulash, all that stuff. Yeah.
All that stuff. You got it.
All that stuff. Yeah. My wife, her father, was Hungarian. I think there's only like one Hungarian bakery left here in Manhattan, but every year she used to get him a certain Hungarian cake, and I forget the name. But yeah, it was tasty. Well, whipped cream involved, obviously. So nothing wrong with that. All right.
I've put on a lot of kilos since I've been here. Let's put it that way.
I can imagine. Yeah. Yeah. Hungarian food is very good.
Yep.
All right. Well, David, unfortunately, we've run out of time. So tell people how they can find out more about you and connect with you.
DavidMasover.com and LinkedIn are the best places to find me.
And that's just David Masover after the last /.
That's it. Massover's like Passover, but there's only one S.
There we go. One way to remember it. All right. Well, David, it's been a pleasure to actually talk to you in person, finally, after months of communicating on LinkedIn, and I look forward to doing it again.
Well, thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, it's been fun. Talk to you soon.
Thanks.
Okay, friends, that was Accelerate for the week. First of all, as always, I want to thank you for joining me, and I want to thank my guest, David Masover. Join me again next week as my guest will be another David J.P. Fisher, or D-Fish as I call him. It's a return visit for David, and we're going to be talking about empathy. The term has almost become a cliche in sales. Every seller thinks they have it. Most don't. And you'll have to join us next week to learn how to develop the ability to be empathic and to develop that deep, trust-based relationship with your buyers. And you'll enjoy this conversation. So be sure to join us then. Before you go, don't forget to check out The Sales House. That's the all-in-one performance accelerator at thesaleshouse.com. If you enjoyed the show, please go to iTunes, wherever you listen to it. Leave your review. Really appreciate that. And so thanks again for joining me. Until next week, I'm your host, Andy Paul. Good selling, everyone.
RingDNA is the leading sales enablement platform that uses AI to help scale business growth. Trusted by the top companies across the globe, RingDNA offers a suite of powerful tools for every sales role. The RingDNA Dialer radically improves sales productivity and call connection rates, while guided selling helps reps know exactly what to do and when to do it. Conversation AI uses artificial intelligence to surface the most impactful coaching opportunities in real time. So, no matter where your team is working from, the RingDNA platform can help them exponentially increase call connections, opportunities, and revenue. Learn more at ringdna.com/platform. That's ringdna.com/platform.